Lincoln Continental Mark 1958 to 1960. To build a better business case for its flagship and the division that marketed the vehicle, the Continental model line underwent extensive changes for the 1958 model year. To widen its sales potential, Ford required Continental to reach a $6,000 price, a 40% reduction from the Mark II, allowing the division to better compete against Cadillac Eldorado and Imperial LeBaron. To allow for production at a larger scale, the Continental model line was more closely integrated with Lincoln, differing primarily in roofline, trim, and grille. For 1959, Ford canceled the Continental division outright, with its model line remaining through the 1960 model year as part of the model cycle. The first all-new unibody design since World War II, this generation of the Continental is one of the largest sedans ever built by Ford Motor Company, or any American automaker. To facilitate continuation of the Continental model line, the division was forced to abandon hand-built construction. Sharing a common chassis and much of the exterior of the Lincoln Premier, Continental production shifted to the then new Wixom assembly plant. To set itself apart from a Lincoln, along with a division-specific grille, all versions of the Continental, including convertibles, were styled with a reverse slant roof line, fitted with a retractable breezeway rear window. First introduced on the 1957 Mercury Turnpike Cruiser, the feature allowed for augmented interior ventilation, along with air conditioning. Unlike the Turnpike Cruiser, the reverse slant of the roofline included the rear window, an element that would reappear on Mercury sedans in the next decade. The Continental Mark III was designed by John Nayyar, chief stylist of Lincoln, assisted by Elwood Ungo, largely drawing influence from the 1955 Ford Latosca concept model designed by Alex Tremulis. Englewood styled the 1959 Mark IV, with Don Del Rosa, who replaced Nayyar as Lincoln chief stylist in 1957, developing the 1960 Mark V as a result of its massive size and the configuration of its headlights. The model line was nicknamed the Slant-Eyed Monster in the Ford Design Studio. The 1958 to 1960 Continental Mark III, V are built upon the same mechanical components utilized by the Lincoln Capri and Premier. For 1958, Lincoln split further from Mercury in body design as part of ongoing efforts to outdo Cadillac, with Lincoln adopting unibody construction for the first time. The Continental shares a common body with the Premier, with the exception of the reverse slant roof line. Shared with Lincoln, Mercury, and the Ford Thunderbird, the Continental Mark III, V were fitted with a 430 cubic inch Mel V8 engine. A 3-speed turbo-drive automatic was the sole transmission. In 1958, the engine produced 375 horsepower, and was detuned to 350 horsepower in 1959, making 315 horsepower in 1960. Using a 131-inch wheelbase, the 1958 Continentals are the longest wheelbase sedans ever built by Ford Motor Company. Longer than a Ford Excursion, the 1958 to 1960 Continentals are the longest sedans ever produced by Ford without 5 miles per hour bumpers. The 1958 Continental Mark III convertible is the longest convertible ever mass-produced in the United States, with the sole exception of the extremely rare 1934 to 1937 Cadillac V16 convertibles. In line with the previous Continental naming tradition, Continental introduced its 1958 model line as the Mark III. In a break from previous practice, the two subsequent model years were marketed as incrementally increased Marks 4 and V. For 1958, Continental released the Mark III in 4 body styles, including a 2-door hardtop and convertible, a 4-door pillared sedan, and a 4-door hardtop sedan, called Langdale. Although far less expensive than the Mark II, the Mark III remained well equipped, retaining air conditioning as an option, relocated from the ceiling to the dashboard. The Mark III became the first Ford Motor Company vehicle to offer an FM radio tuner, as a rarely ordered option. A unique option was auto lube, allowing for the car to lubricate itself, as long as an oil reservoir was kept full. For 1959, the Continental Mark IV saw a minor restyling, with the elimination of dagmars from the front bumpers and side sculpting becoming much less deeply drawn. Coinciding with the end of the Continental division, Continental 3 fender badging is replaced by separate Continental and Mark IV badging. The grille is restyled slightly, with the headlight clusters now integrated into the egg grate grille. For 1960, the Continental Mark V saw another styling update, with flatter front bumpers, with dagmars. The Continental badging was restyled, with Mark V badging moved to the rear fenders. On the front fenders, 4 horizontal chrome spheres were added. Using a similar layout as the Mark IV, the Mark V was given a restyled grille. The 1960 Continental features a beautiful one-year-only restyled dashboard. The rear grille and bumper were also completely restyled, setting it apart from the previous 2 years. The rear suspension was changed from coil spring to leaf springs, the fuse box was placed under the hood for ease of access, and cruise control was offered for the first time. Alongside the Mark III, IV, and V, there are 2 additional models of the third-generation Continental. In 1959, Lincoln added the limousine and town car body styles, the latter marked the first use of the town car name by Lincoln. Available only in black, both versions were built with a model-specific formal rear roofline with a padded vinyl roof and smaller rear window for privacy. The limousine featured a retractable partition between the front and rear seats with a rear seat radio on the back of the front seat. The wheelbase remained the same 131 inches on the limousine as the other Continental models, and the rear seating was also the same dimensions. Priced at $10,230 for the limousine and $9,207 for the town car, these cars came equipped with every optional accessory offered that year. The air conditioning capacity was increased with the addition of a trunk-mounted evaporator to increase rear seat cooling. The 1959 to 1960 town car and limousine are among the rarest Lincoln vehicles ever sold. Only 214 examples of the $9,200 town car were produced, and only 83 examples of the $10,200 limousine were produced. Nearly 40% lower in price than the Continental Mark II, the Mark III would go on to sell better than the Mark II predecessor. From 1958 to 1960, the Lincoln division would lose over $60 million, along with the launch of newly developed vehicles in a recession economy, a factor that contributed to the downfall of the Edsel line. Lincoln and Continental were faced with overcoming the expense of developing a vehicle that was shared with neither Ford nor Mercury. In 1961, as Lincoln redesigned its model line, the Continental went from being the flagship Lincoln to the only model line sold by the division, for the next 16 years. In the mid-1960s, Ford made a decision to develop a new successor to the Mark II, naming it the Continental Mark III, effectively beginning the Mark series. As with the Mark II and the 1958 to 1960 Continentals, it was sold, marketed, and serviced by Lincoln, though not officially badged as such. As part of the launch, the existence of the 1958 Continental Mark III that shared its name was heavily downplayed. A second nickname to this generation is dubbed the Forgotten Marks.